to the series of interviews that I'm doing with key policymakers and influencers in the critical Australia-India relationship. One of the most important strategic and people-to-people relationships that we are seeing developing today. We have with us somebody very interesting, uh, Daksha Shridhar, who is the co-founder of Schoolgoers, an organization dedicated to improving education for disadvantaged children in India. She co-founded this organization with her husband Ash in 2014 after taking a study tour to India where they observed the challenges faced by children in accessing quality education. Daksha, welcome, and I'm really so looking forward to getting to know your work. It seems to be very, very impactful.
Thanks, Rami. It's very nice to meet with you today. So very excited to be on board.
Can you tell us right at the outset about schoolgoers? How did you end up setting this up? What motivated you, and why is it called schoolgoers?
Yes, yep. Look, I guess we've called our organization Schoolgoers because it's literally about those who go to school. And so we were just very excited that the name for the organization was available because it couldn't describe our mission any better. What we really want to achieve with this organization is to create life-changing educational opportunities for children who are living in extreme poverty and children who are forced to work. So myself and my husband Ash co-founded this after we were inspired through our study tour, as you mentioned, that we took in 2014.
You started this organization in a very, very remote area of Bulgaria. Am I right?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. Actually, when we took our trip to India in 2014, we visited Bihar as part of our travels. So there we met a number of change makers, and we still work with them today. So their names are Naresh Kumar and Pankaj Kumar. And this duo, they were delivering education to children who were actually enrolled in school, but they weren't attending school. And I guess the main reason is because of the fixed time commitment that the school required, and these were children who faced extreme poverty, and so really couldn't afford that full-time commitment that school required. So we were inspired by their particular model. So they were teaching flexible morning classes as well as evening classes, which allowed the children to actually access the schooling that they required. However, unfortunately, because of how they were delivering it in a makeshift building without enough educational resources, we were inspired by them, but really wanted to make sure that we could take this to the next step through setting up an established, secure, formal school that was inspired by their model to get the poorest of the poor accessing education, but with the best in class examples and principles that we know of global pedagogy.
You were born in well, you pretty much moved to Australia at the age of 2. Was this, when you went to Bihar, was it a huge cultural shock? Were you really moved?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't been to Bihar before, and what I had seen of the rest of India is that there was a lot of international NGO support in many of the cities that I've traveled to before. So Chennai to Mumbai, Calcutta, Delhi, a lot of these cities, despite having extreme pockets of poverty, had a lot of NGO donations and support, whereas I found, very surprisingly that Bihar lacked any kind of investment from both global organizations as well as within Indian nationals and Indian organizations. And so that for me was a real stark contrast in the level of support that was being provided to the communities within Bihar versus any other part of India. And I was very shocked to see just how neglected the state was as a result.
So you mentioned a little bit of this earlier, where you said that because of the fixed timings that the school required, these children couldn't attend school. But I want to ask you, what do you think is one of the larger reasons, or what are the many reasons for the high number of out of school children in India, despite the country providing free and compulsory education?
I mean, that's the irony, isn't it? The fact that India does actually rank in the top 5 countries with children and young people out of school, despite the fact that they've got some really strong measures to actually combat and engage children in school, which is the free and compulsory education. I guess the reality is, you can't simply construct a building or a school and have a teacher, and drive attendance, because particularly in the poorer pockets of India, we overlook a number of factors that actually prohibit children from regularly attending school. So I guess some of the key kind of factors we've found is, the extreme family poverty, poor quality teaching, or even teachers not actually regularly attending and turning up at school, and also poor school infrastructure. And as an example, near our school that we have inaugurated, Gongaria Primary School, the closest school doesn't actually have fully enclosed toilet blocks and proper sanitation facilities. And so you think about, how are you meaningfully actually driving attendance when you don't have the right infrastructure in place and the right means to encourage the families to drive their children and get them going to school? So these are some of, I guess, the key barriers that really need to be addressed if we want to meaningfully encourage attendance. And then you've got the layer of COVID-19 as well. And I think that's really driven greater urgency now on education, because we've had 1.5 million schools close in India across the 2 pandemic years. And so you've got both, for the first time, an increase in child labor again after 20 years, which is, honestly very shocking. But then you've also got children who have been really, really left behind because poorer families couldn't actually afford the technological access that remote learning enables them, to do.
Correct. You mentioned that there weren't any enclosed washrooms, This would possibly be a huge hindrance, especially to the girls, you know. How would they come to school? But, also there are other limitations when it comes to education for girls. Like, let's say in some areas, there might be early marriage, that might be the norm. How do you think gender inequality in education can be addressed?
Look, I think supporting girls starts by supporting their families. Gender inequality is a difficult issue, and it's not something that can be debated and won with families overnight. It does take a lot of time and investment to meaningfully change people's mindset and attitudes around this. I think most importantly, it's about highlighting for families who do want early marriage, what is the value of education, and how can we actually convince you that the value of education is more important than the value that early childhood marriage can bring your daughter. So it's starting to have that conversation with families, which we've started to do because we've been, doing consultative work with the communities for about 7 years now. So it's been an ongoing dialogue, and definitely something that we have found to be an issue within the communities that we are working with. So I guess we'd love to bring female representation as the forefront of what we do. Me as a female, of an Indian background who is setting up the school, and other female staff. I'd love the families to be able to see strong, successful women who have, had a good education and now successful careers. And it's because we've actually delayed marriage from 16 or 18 to 25 or even later. And this is how we actually start to influence a change in the attitudes that success comes with delaying marriage and providing education to daughters.
And has the local communities been receptive to this?
Yeah, I mean, it's taken a lot of time for sure. In the beginning, we still did find a lot of the communities that we're working with not really wanting to prioritize their daughters. A family that we knew of 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons, asked us if we're limited with the places for their families, could they actually send their sons instead of their daughters to the school? And we said, no, we can't do that. And started that dialogue. And it took 2 years to actually, show them the value that the education could provide their daughters. So it takes investment and time. And then, as you mentioned before, it also takes certain features of a school that will encourage their daughters to stay in school. So, gender toilet blocks, female safety being paramount, and having sanitation facilities that allow, women to actually and girls to actually feel comfortable using washrooms and bathrooms as well.
Correct. So, what really is the model that Schoolgoer has in terms of working with local communities, stakeholders, to ensure sustainability of what it's trying to achieve? And does Schoolgoers also take on partnerships and collaborations?
Yeah, look, we are a very new, young organization in that we inaugurated the school in December, and we'll be opening classes in April this year. So it is a young model, but we have taken a lot of time and investment to actually collaborate with the communities across the last 7 years. So for the last 7 years, they've really built up rapport with us. We've been able to build up our credibility so that they know us very well. They can come to us with issues and come to us with ideas that they also want for the school. So one example is the fact that the residents of Gongaria village really shared with us how paramount and transformative English language is. So Gaia, the broader area is an area where we get a lot of tourists because it's the spiritual birthplace of Buddha. And so English is hugely transformative to the residents and the communities, because then they can engage with tourists far more than just speaking English alone. And so we realized that we actually had to double down our investments in ensuring that English was something that we could deliver and make sure all the children could speak fluently. So we've really had consultative dialogue with the communities to understand what is important to you and what can we make sure that the school, the principles are rooted in the school. Another example is the fact that we actually want the community to ultimately own and take ownership of this school. So, we've built classrooms which can also, can also be used as English language classes for the adults. So it's not only the children who are benefiting, but the wider community, because we want the full community to be able to feel like this is their school. Some of the features might be those of global schools use, but ultimately this is what's going to benefit them and their children.
So how would schoolgoers provide support to students? Because a majority of them would be from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds. What sort of support would we provide to them to prioritize their education, despite many of them possibly having many additional responsibilities at home?
And this is where we were inspired by the model that we saw when we first visited Bihar in 2014, which is how can we use education in a flexible way so that we are actually allowing families who have been left behind the mainstream system to still access the right level of learning and the right education. And so one of the key features of our model is to actually set up a morning class as well as an afternoon class. So we're actually delivering the exact same curriculum that we see in best-in-class schools across India. However, we've condensed the timing required to allow the classes to be split up like this. And so if children do need to go home for a couple of hours for lunch, or a couple of hours because they need to check on their families or younger siblings. There's flexibility that allows them to be able to do this. And again, this is how we've encouraged the families to continue to make sure that their children not just enroll, but actually continue to attend the school regularly with us, because we're not limited by the constraints of another kind of mainstream model. So that's probably the key differentiator between the Schoolgoers model and other NGO schools that you'll see in the rest of India.
Quite right. And you've been obviously working in developing this idea for a really long time. But COVID-19 would have been, like for many other organizations and projects, something that had great impact on your timeline and progress. What are the challenges that you faced while you were building Schoolgoers up because of COVID?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I'm sure, like most organizations, we've just been equally impacted by that. And one of the key ways is the fact that we have been delayed in getting the school inaugurated and finally constructed. I think by about 1 year plus, we encountered delays of that. We're also working with residents who are largely laborers and agricultural farmers. And so these are community groups who are some of the most impacted by COVID because they were forced to stop work, stay inside, and they don't have any other means of bringing an income or bringing food to their families. So they faced significant hardship as well. One of the ways that we've started to now navigate and change that is to make sure that we're employing, and we have employed as many of these families as possible throughout the construction process. And so any laborer work, we've made sure that we're actually engaging the families from this particular community. We've made sure that we're actually sourcing all of our materials and construction equipment from the community, even though it's probably much cheaper to ship via Amazon. Amazon can get to any part of India now, but these are the ways that we really want to make sure that we're actually rebuilding the local economy here within Bihar. And on top of that, we've made sure that we've also provided care packages to all of the families that we are working with as well to make sure that they had the right medicines throughout COVID, to make sure that they had the right heating blankets, food, and other kind of, essential security items as well.
But how did you manage all of this, considering that you possibly couldn't, could not travel to India? This must have taken a lot of organization and communication. So how did you manage it?
Yeah, it was no easy feat, but for an organization like ours, which is both Australia based as well as India based, this is why it's really important that we have local contacts on the ground who can help us to deliver services like this. So the two change makers that we worked with, we've now formally employed one of them, and they've been instrumental in allowing us to connect with the community in a really meaningful way. And so throughout COVID, these are the volunteers and now staff who actually purchased the equipment and the ingredients that we suggested could make the biggest impact in these communities, and then delivered it to the community members themselves. So we were very lucky with that. But yes, it wasn't easy sourcing medicines when everything was out of stock during the horrible years of COVID.
I can imagine. Uh, Naksha, what are your future plans? I know you're yet to start classes and you will be doing so very soon. Um, Less than 2 months, So
Yes.
congratulations, you at least reached this point through all these challenges. But what are your future plans for expanding and improving education projects in Bihar? If this model, which I'm sure will be very successful, pans out the way you expect it to, what are the great challenges that you'd want to take in the future?
Yeah, look, as you say, this is not just one school. We set this up with a long-term vision. And the long-term vision is the fact that, we recognize that Bihar is a state of 120 million people. And, within 50% of these are actually under the age of 25. So there's a huge opportunity where we can actually create meaningful social change through an increased focus on education in the state. So this is our long-term vision, that we would love to scale additional schoolgoers schools across the state, and work with some of the most neglected communities across Bihar and potentially in other parts of India. But our initial focus is on making sure that we're actually working where there's where the rest of India is actually neglecting these particular communities. And so we'd love to build continued schools across the next 5 to 10 years, potentially even longer than that, and really build the schoolgoers model further.
Is there a website? Is there a way that people who may want to support this project can get in touch with you?
Yes, and we'd love support. I guess we're an army of volunteers, mostly apart from the people that we have now started to employ in Schoolgoers India. So we are looking for volunteers in a number of different areas, including how we can actually build sustainable income streams. We'd love people to visit our website, schoolgoers.org, to sign up to our Facebook page and Instagram page and really see what the updates are that we're about, and really engage with us. We'd love to have any notes sent to us so we can actually engage with you as well.
Finally, Daksha, I wish you a great amount of success, and I think it's amazing the work that you guys are doing, especially in remote areas like this, which needs the most amount of attention and outreach. Um, you must have met some very interesting children or children who've shown great interest in education. Could you give us one or two stories?
Yes, I mean, for us, what's really powerful is the fact that the children, as I said, most of the parents are actually laborers and agricultural farmers, and so we went to one of our recent trips when we went to Bihar. We brought a number of us who came from different backgrounds, and we talked about the careers that we had embarked in and some of our families. And I highlighted the fact that in my family, I've got people who come from, who have engaged in medicine and in law and in academia. And it's so powerful to hear the children come back to us later and tell us about their vision of, employment being so different from simply what they see in their own day-to-day world, simply because we've actually given them their first exposure that they can actually dream of a job outside what they see every day. And so we've had children come to us now who really talk to us about why they now dream to be a nurse or a doctor, because they've heard some of the stories that we've shared with them. And it's really very beautiful, because all it takes is sharing of one small story to open up the doors of opportunity to children who are neglected from hearing this. And so that for me is just the smallest example of how transformative even having a dialogue and providing a bit more awareness to this type of community is really.
That really is really very sweet. It reminds you of how, children can dream, and,
Yes.
somewhere through their hardships, they forget that, and how easy it is to ignite that kind of hope and ambition and, you know, dream that they should have. That's really sweet to hear, Daksha. But Daksha, thank you for your time and for being a part of these series that we are doing with key people. That really helps us understand one of the fastest growing relationships between two of the largest democracies in the world, and that is the friendship between Australia and India. So thank you so much, Daksha, for taking out time, and we wish you a huge amount of success.
Thank you so much, Rami. It was a pleasure to meet you, and pleasure to be on today's call.